Hi, my name is Kamil Olufowobi, and I am an under 40 CEO.
The African Renaissance. The concept that the African people and nation shall overcome the current challenges confronting the continent and achieve cultural, scientific, and economic renewal is here, with young men and women taking the lead. Some call them the new school heroes. We call them under 40 CEOs.
From working at ExxonMobil Nigeria as a project manager to heading retail products and sales for prestige banking services at the United Bank for Africa, Kamil will then rise to become Vice President Acceptance in Sub-Sahara Africa Division before founding MyPad. His journey to connecting people of African descent has led to the creation of an excellent platform, My Roots in Africa.
So I'm guessing that connectology also had a little bit or all to do with the founding of My Roots in Africa. That's an organization you recently founded, right?
So it's an initiative under MyPad.
Okay.
So in the journey of running the most influential people of African descent, remember we're dealing with people of African descent in the diaspora and those in the continent. So what we discovered in that interaction is that people of African descent outside of Africa, and I'm talking ancestral Africans, those Africans who left Africa via boat, in Colombia, in Brazil, in the US, they have a deep desire to reconnect with homeland. Yes? And My Roots in Africa was an initiative that we created to support them to reduce that barrier of connecting with Africa and also connect it with the climate action movement. So here's how it works. If I'm a person of African descent who lives in Brazil, which has over 100 million people of African descent, the largest diaspora population in the world, and our social economic, positions in all of these societies are low. So getting a visa, so that's a barrier. Getting a flight, language barrier. So there were a number of barriers that really, didn't support them with having a connection to the continent. So what we decided to do was to build an app which would allow them to plant a tree remotely or in person, right, on African soil, so that they can literally say, I have roots in Africa. So it's connecting people with places. So connectology, you find it's reoccurring in everything that I do because it is about connection. People and places, people and people, people and self, right? Because that's what it's always about. It's connecting you with new and higher possibilities.
This is quite exciting. And what if you were to sum up, your vision for Africa in one sentence? What would it be?
An Africa that we desire, built by for Africa, and it's an inspiration to the world. You see, Africa is one of the world's richest continent in terms of natural resources, but it has some of the poorest people in the world. Africa did not do this to itself. There's a saying that says there are two types of Africans, right? Africans and ex-Africans, meaning we were all Africans before we became anything else. So as a global, society, as humanity, we all have a collective responsibility to ensure that Africa, attains its highest possibilities. It is one of the richest continents in the world, yet it has some of the poorest people. Africa didn't happen to itself, right? So there is a responsibility that also the world also has to Africa, because at the end of the day, we're all, Africans, and we need to have be responsible to ensure that a continent as rich as Africa doesn't have, poverty, and it has, prosperity. On the continent. So my vision of Africa is one that we build Africa together as humanity to really live up to its highest possibilities.
Okay, that's amazing. And I'm positive that, a lot of the work that you're doing and have done and all you've achieved so far couldn't have been done without having to, cross some hurdles and, basically experience challenges.
Absolutely.
What were those major hurdles and challenges that you had to overcome to make the strides that you've made so far?
When I look back now in retrospect, MyPad is a manifestation of a difficulty, of a challenge. And that challenge was racism, overcoming and even understanding it, right? And how do you deal with this virus, this global virus that exists all over the world, which is racism, right? And the vaccine, for the ideologies against racism, requires for ingenuity, right? We have to come up with vaccines to cure humanity of this idea that one race is better than the other, that someone matters more than another, right? So for me, the challenge of racism is actually what led, to the creation of MyPad. MyPad, as a global network, is a haven for people of African descent to know that they matter, to know that their gifts matter, and it would not be dismissed because of the color of their skin, right? So MyPad was an evolution of a problem. So I think when you look at my track record, I've found difficulties and challenges and turned them into opportunities. People of African descent couldn't visit Africa or were having troubles with connecting with Africa. That's a problem. You solve a problem. What I always say is, if you're not happy with the amount of money that you're making or the amount of money in your bank account, you shouldn't be asking, where is the money? You should be asking yourself, what problem am I solving? Because when you solve problems, you create value and then money will come. So the question is, what problem are you solving? Right? The bigger the problem you solve, the bigger the value you create, the bigger the money that you get. So that's been my trajectory, and my mantra is, what problem are you solving? Right? So identify the problem, be a problem solver, create value, and then all things will be added on to you.
Okay. So tell me, have you ever, failed in the course of, building this organization? And if yes, tell me about some of your failures.
I've never failed, but I've always learned. So I always say this, that you don't fail, you learn. So you either win or you learn. You don't fail, right? Because it's a learning process. What people call failure, I call experience. What people call, failing, right? It's part of the process. So I trust the process. The failures will come. It is how you rise to the occasion that really defines how successful you're going to be. So to answer that question, have I ever failed? Yes, I have. But I would never acknowledge it as a failure. I would acknowledge it as a learning. So I win and I learn.
Nice. I like that perspective.
Yeah.
So what is the current structure of your organization?
So the most influential people of African descent is a foundation, a nonprofit organization that exists both in the U.S. as a 501c organization and in Nigeria limited by guarantee, while most influential 100 company is a recognition and media publishing, consultant, organization. So that's the structure that we run, today. A foundation that focuses on impact, and also a consultancy business that also helps our honorees and governments around the world with connecting and building the Africa that we desire.
All right. So tell me, what are the values that drive, the work that you do at MyPad?
So people, excellence, right, are the two things that drive, the vision at MyPad, is identifying people, because I know for a fact and understand that there is no success that you can attain, maintain, and sustain by yourself. You need people. So identify the best and the brightest. One of my favorite quotes is the one that says, you never underestimate, what a small group of people, a committed group of people can do. So I'm that kind of guy who, I'm not after the 100 million followers. I'm just looking for the 100 people who can change the world. Just that, group of people who will come together. And that's what has always happened, right? It's a small, committed group of people who do end up changing the world. So who are the 100 who will change the world, who would build an Africa that we desire, and an Africa that would influence, the world to be a better place?
I know that you've done a lot of work across Africa.
Yeah.
There's some countries in Africa you're very well traveled. And in some circles, Africa is still referred to as a country. And I do know that there's a lot that unites us, but there's also a lot of things that differentiate, from region to region, from nuances to more. What are those things you would say unites us, and what are those unique things from region
to region? Yeah. Very good question. I mean, you are absolutely right. Africa is not a country, right? It's a continent of very diverse people across different regions, culturally, religiously, right? It's a beautiful and diverse continent. And what unites us is that we're one landmass, one of the biggest land masses, in the world. And in my experience working in Africa is that, of course, the West, the North, the East, and the South all have what you call local nuances in terms of, food and even business cultures, right, that differ. For me as a person of African descent working on the continent, it's always important to let the world know, and even Africans know, that Africa is not a monolithic. It's people of African descent of different expressions. And all of these expressions is what makes Africa such a unique and exciting place to work. So much possibilities, on the continent that we're yet to even unravel. And that's why I love doing the work that I do, is connecting those who have been disconnected from Africa, being that bridge, to connecting them with the continent. But Africa is not one place. It's not monolithic. So many different expressions.
So still on the subject of people, we all know that human resource is a key element to consider when, building any enterprise.
Yes.
It's all about your people. How do you typically hire? What are you looking for?
So in terms of people, it's always key to identify people's skill sets and gift sets in bringing them on board, to support you with their purpose, right? So in hiring across Africa, the idea is to find people who understand the continent, who speak African, who understand the local nuances in the countries where you are doing business. We've been blessed to have country directors across Africa and across the diaspora. Many of them are our past honorees, people we've identified who are doing great things in their countries, who come on board, who see the vision of why it's important for us to build a global network, to have a global worldview, because again, Africa cannot be disconnected from the rest of the world. We have to do business with the world, and we have to build the rules to ensure that Africa, Africa first, in terms of how do we ensure that we build a continent that we desire. You cannot have one of the richest continents in the world to continue to have some of the poorest people, right? So we need to be able to rightfully distribute the resources of Africa for the glory of Africans.
All right. How would you describe your leadership style?
My leadership style, I would describe it that I lead by being in service to others. I don't show up saying I want to lead. I show up asking, how can I be of service? And what I've found is that when you work, using your gift sets and your skill sets for a purpose, and you work in the service of others, right? It puts you in leadership positions. So the intention is not to lead everybody, but instead to serve. And being a servant leader, right, So being a servant leader is my leadership style.
What would you say are those key skill sets that CEOs need to have either acquired or naturally possess to build an organization of repute?
It's important not to just recognize people and let them continue to work in silos, but for them to identify that, when we work together, right, we can build, the Africa that we desire. We cannot do this in silo. So this is where this thinking comes from, knowing that it is people who will build the Africa that we want, and it's people working together that will build the Africa that we do desire. So one of the skill sets that I see that is critical for CEOs to build the Africa we desire is to understand that you cannot do this alone. You have to work with and through people who share the same value systems as you do, for you to be a leader who is a servant leader, who has empathy. And it's not just about the material, right? To live a purpose-driven life, to understand your gift sets and your skill sets, and to use it for a purpose that is truly your divine calling, to support them to connect to their authentic reason for doing what they do, right? Many CEOs are very gifted, they're very skilled, they're very talented, right? But their person is something that also needs to be worked on. So we would support them in developing a clear narrative around their gift sets, their skill sets, and their good character, to use that to work on a purpose that is their divine calling. You see, many of them work on purposes with their gift sets and the skill sets that's not their calling, and they don't live a fulfilled life, right? So fulfillment is missing. So that's what we're definitely excited about. And as I explained earlier, the MyPad Most Influential list comprised of 4 categories, right? But the business and entrepreneurship category is the most critical because it's the pillar of economics. And there is no change that we can attain in this world without the economics. So how do we support those CEOs to ensure that they're growing year-on-year growth in their businesses by developing some of these skill sets that would help them become, the leaders that we need them to be, for them to become the best versions of themselves so that they can lead. Many of us want to lead millions of people, but we can't even lead one person, you. So the goal is to support them with connecting authentically with themselves, right? And have a clarity of thought and purpose, and then begin to deliver the Africa that we desire.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's really amazing.
With the amount of work required to be a connectologist, linking people of African descent across Africa to create win-win outcomes and ultimately for the glory of the continent, I am positive that Kamil winds down and finds ways to distress. What are his lifestyle choices and how does he refresh?
So I have a few quick fire questions for you.
All right.
What do you love to eat?
I love swallow, if that's what, pounded yam. I love and soups. I love
How would you describe your style?
My style?
Fashion style.
Oh, fashion style. My fashion style has evolved, and it's now it's African. I don't wear suits and ties anymore. I breathe and live African, right? So that's I express myself, through African fabric or African styles, just as a way to let the world know that I'm clear on who I am. I'm grateful, and I'm happy to be of African descent. So yes.
What are your favorite brands to wear?
Brands? Well, now, like I said, I don't like to be a billboard, so I don't have any brands, off the top of my head. But African designers are top of mind for me.
Okay. What other CEOs do you currently look up to?
I love Fab, CEO of and founder of Under 40 CEO. Over the years when I've met him, he has been consistent in being a leader who's in service to others and in service to our people and to Africa, to make Africa that continent that we desire. So that's someone I definitely, look up to. I mean, looking across Africa, some of the CEOs that I look up to would be Strife, Masiyiwa, Tony Elumelu is another one I do admire, and also looking in the diaspora, CEOs like Robert F. Smith. So there's some of the CEOs that I actually, look up to. I like how they move and what they're trying to do in terms of connecting the diaspora and the continent.
What's your favorite car to travel?
I'm not a car person.
Your favorite travel destination?
Africa, right? I still want to explore Africa. As much as I've seen the world, I haven't seen much of Africa. So I really look forward to seeing more of Africa. I've seen the world. I've seen Asia. I went to school and worked in Asia. I grew up in America. I've been to South America. I've been to Costa Rica. I've been to Vietnam. I've been to very interesting places around the world, but I would love to visit more and see more of Africa.
Your favorite book of all time?
Of all time, that's a tough one. But one that comes to mind right now is Success Runs in Our Race, written by Judge C. Fraser, who's known as the Black American godfather of networking. So he gave me my start on this journey of networking, understanding how to connect with people. And my experience led me to evolve from being a networker to becoming a connectologist. But he gave me my start. So that's a book that I can tell you it really helped define, my trajectory in terms of the work that I do today.
All right. So what book are you reading right now?
Okay, so the two books that are on my table right now, one is Obama's Promised Land, and the other is a coffee table book of Mandela. It seems impossible until it's done. And every time I glance and I see these two, books on my table, I realize one is a person of African descent I admire in the diaspora and one inside the continent. And that's what MyPath is about. How do we bring, the diaspora with their counterparts and get them working together for the glory of Africa? So it's a reflection of where my mind is. And it's reassuring when I just glance over and I see that. But yes, those are the two books that I can pinpoint right now that are in my...
So finally, Kamil, I'd like to know, what makes you happy?
Happiness. What makes me happy is finding joy, because happiness is happenstance, things that are happening to you, right? So joy, on the other hand, is what is inherently in you, the gratitude of just being alive and my connection with my Creator. That love and joy I get from knowing that there's a grace upon my life really brings me joy. And in the highs and in the lows, in the valleys or in the hills, I always have joy. And happiness is subjective, right? It depends on, the moment and what's happening. But what makes me happy is being in touch with the things that give me joy, and that's God.
Amazing. Thank you for coming on Under 40 CEOs, Kamil.
It was a pleasure. Hi, my name is Kamil Olufowobi, and you too can be an Under 40 CEO.